I'm Susan Matson, and welcome to another IAQG PSCI webinar. This webinar will focus on the items to be audited during an AS/EN JISQ 90-100 audit when the IAQG standard AS/EN SJAC 9145 is contracted. Presenting today will be Jennifer Gray from Spirit Aerosystems, who is the IDR for the 9145 standard, and Mark Doolittle from Collins Aerospace, who is the leader for the IAQG PSCI team. Jennifer.
Thank you, Susan. Again, today we're going to go over some of the 9145 information regarding auditing, and we'll go ahead and get started. To start, let's go over the agenda. We're going to have a quick overview of APQP and identify 4 of the main takeaways we want an auditor to have. We're going to go through the timing of the new standard versus the old standard. The standard is under revision, so we want to give you an update on that. We're also going to review the shalls that should be reviewed at a minimum during an audit. And then we're going to arm you with some additional resources. So if you're at an audit and you have questions, you know who to contact. Okay, to start, APQP overview. First of all, there is a misconception in our industry that APQP is a quality tool because advanced product quality planning, the word quality is in the title. However, APQP is actually a project management methodology. The APQP leader is responsible for the multidisciplinary team, the project plan, etc. Therefore, APQP truly is a project management process. Next, APQP drives a multidisciplinary team approach. Too often in our industry, we have worked in our silos, meaning quality stays in the quality world, engineering stays in the engineering world, etc. And when we do this, we're not doing a very good job of communicating across the functions or being collaborative when developing a new product or process. APQP takes that away and enforces us to work together. So the third bullet is APQP versus PPAP. There is a misconception that PPAP is APQP, but they are actually 2 very different processes. APQP comes before PPAP. PPAP is more of a change control process and is done at the end of APQP. However, it keeps going. It does not end once you've done one PPAP. We will go into that in further detail later on within this presentation. And then lastly, successful implementation of APQP requires leadership, commitment, and support. It cannot be a process that is pushed bottom up. It needs to come top down. Upper leadership needs to be able to provide support by escalating issues, removing roadblocks. This is the only way APQP can be successful. All right, timing. Like I said, the 9145 standard is under revision. It went through its first ballot in October of 2023. There was 54 approvals, 8 disapprovals, 3 waves. We received over 200 comments, which the team diligently dispositioned. Some of those were technical of nature that we did decide to incorporate into the standard. Therefore, because of that, we have to send it back through ballot. Currently, the 9145 review team is reviewing the final updates. We are also having SAE help us update the ballot or the template as it's on the old, and then we will reballot at the end of July, early August. It will be a 28-day ballot, and hopefully we'll get the 75% approval in order to move forward. Real quick, just to remind everyone that this is going from a 9145 standard to an IA 9145 standard. Additionally, we do review some things in this presentation that are in the new standard and not the old standard. So until the new revision is published, please keep that in mind, and we'll identify some of those. All right, the shall review. So how did we come up with the shalls that we want to review with you today? The 9145 team took all 52 shalls back to their organizations, and we voted on what were the top ones that we felt were the most valuable in the 9145 standard to be audited. Therefore, the following shalls that Mark is going to review with you are the ones that the 9145 team deemed are the most vital. Mark?
Thank you, Jennifer. What I'd like to start out is a quick understanding of APQP for those who are relatively new to it. APQP itself is a 5-phase new product introduction program, including phase 1, which is planning, phase 2, which I like to say is a design engineering phase, phase 3 is manufacturing engineering, phase 4 is the product validation itself, and phase 5 is production. But 9145, where it differs a little from the traditional automotive standard that many of us are familiar with, is that 9145 includes both APQP and PPAP, whereas the automotive standard kept those separate. They were separate. If you recall the blue books, there was a blue book for APQP and there was a blue book for PPAP. In our standard itself, we've incorporated them both. So what essentially has changed in the aerospace process is whereas the automotive process ended, the APQP process ended once you got into phase 5, review at 30, 60, or 90 days, sometime increment after. Our phase 5 continues as a PPAP phase. So 9145 is actually a cradle to grave, whereas the automotive the first shall statement we want to talk about here is the general requirement statement. What I'm going to do is the actual shall statement is highlighted in gray. I'm going to read that shall statement. Then I'm going to kind of talk off the slide in general for the intent of the shall, what we were trying as authors, what we were trying to really intend in the purpose of that shall, and then the objective evidence. We're speaking to auditors themselves to say this is the evidence that we're looking for compliance to that shall statement. So the first statement, section 4.1.4, general requirements. The organization's planning for product design and production process changes shall determine the applicability APQP deliverables based on the project risk assessment performed by a multidisciplinary team to ensure that all product and process changes are effectively executed. So this statement, and again, the shall statements we've selected were the ones that we felt are the most critical ones, the ones that we can say if you can get these shalls, you pretty much have the essence of APQP. This statement is obviously one of the most critical ones. It is the one that we've affectionately called the tailorability statement. Probably better explained as the applicability statement. So what this does, the issue that we had in creating an aerospace version of this automotive process called APQP is automotive has a very consistent type of industry, meaning they have very high volumes and they usually have very low product mix. Our industry itself can range all the way from that all the way to very low volumes and very high product mix. So we have a much wider span. There was people on the writing team that actually worked in the space industry that kept reminding us that they did satellites. They did satellites. And every time we tried to talk about SPC or things like this, they were like, we do one. We talked about production and they said, we only do prototypes. So this standard itself had to have a tailorability statement or applicability statement. And that's exactly what this statement is. And in this statement, you decide based on the project you're working on exactly what is applicable in the standard. And the intention of this is when contracted, this is then discussed and negotiated with your customer. And we actually have a guidance section that actually gives you a template that actually has all the shalls listed on it. It says yes, no, you can check which box, and then for customer signature and supplier signature for us to agree during contract exactly which one of the shalls we will and won't do. So objective evidence, what we're looking for in here to complete this shalls, we're looking for a completed project risk assessment. Okay, and the guidance material, the SCMH material, does have examples of these, but the guidance material, and hear me say this a few times, the guidance material, the SCM Supply Chain Management Handbook, is not auditable. It does not have shalls in it. It is only guidance material. So from an audit standpoint, what we're really looking for here is that there was some type of project risk assessment done. There was some type of documented a document that actually shows, yes, we did consider project risk assessment when considering what applicable deliverables were. And a completed APQP applicability risk assessment, again, that you could easily use that template that we created in the SEMH. That's what we created it for. It's not a shall to do that, but again, something that shows why you picked the ones, why you tailored this document, and how the other ones weren't really applicable to what it is you're doing. And then a completed supply chain management plan with risk identified, again, supplier risk assessment. When auditing this, we're looking for a document that shows that you took this into consideration. Okay, it's fairly subjective what that document would be. Again, in the guidance material, we do have examples, but that's not the shall document. What we're looking for here is that this was considered when we engage this tailorability statement. Okay, next slide, Jennifer. Next shall statement. We got quite a bit more in this one. The advanced product quality planning project management is this shall, section 4.2. I'm going to read the top, and the items that are below I'm actually going to read when we talk about the evidence we're looking for, because we itemized it. So it's going to make it easier to understand. The organization shall define how APQP is applied within their PDP, including establishing requirements for. Okay, so what this shall statement is, this is different than the rest of the shall statements. The rest of the shall statements we're looking for, a project or something that I can audit to. This is actually a shall statement that's audited to a procedure. So what this is saying is that we're looking for your procedure, your company's product launch procedure, product development process. We're looking for that procedure to incorporate 9145, to incorporate the shalls. So the difference we have in our industry is many years ago, 30 years ago, when automotive launched APQP, the idea of project launch systems was relatively new back then. And with the automotive industry, they simply took APQP and that became everyone's product development process. They used APQP released in everybody's system. So we were all using the same project and launch development process. But what happened in aerospace without the adoption of APQP from 30 years ago? What happened over time was individual companies started creating their own project development process. And what we have now throughout our industry is, no independent of what company you go to, you see a different development process. You see all these different acronyms that are meaning the same thing, meaning this is how we launch a product. The good news here is that in many cases they were kind of born out of the shadow of APQP. So we already see a lot of the APQP elements in them. But this statement is coming in saying, okay, independent of what your process or procedure is within your company, we're going to be looking to make sure APQP is embedded in it. If you've chosen not to simply use APQP, you want to use your own system, that's fine. But APQP has to be covered on it. Where this gets keyed is not just the elements, but also the sequence of time. Okay, so next slide, and I've already talked through the intent. The objective evidence we're looking for. Identifying a project owner who is responsible for completing project objectives and sure, okay. So we want to see in here that you've actually identified the owner of this process, okay? And we don't directly say this in here, although we indirectly say it in 3 paragraphs in 9145, that clearly the owner of APQP is whoever your company's program management are. Or I'll say it in a more generic term, which is what we were really alluding to in the standard itself, the leader of your cross-functional team. Whoever is the leader, whatever title we use for that in your company, whoever is that leader of the cross-functional team is also to be the leader of the advanced product quality process. And this can be defined in roles and responsibilities, or it can be a document or procedure. It's really quite flexible how we identify this, but as auditors, we need to make sure that we're actually looking for this to be documented somewhere. Implementing a multidisciplinary approach to assure effective communication. Again, you can see this in roles and responsibilities, whether it's a RACI, or whatever your company calls it, something that shows that we have a multidisciplinary approach to this. You can actually see that even in Gantt charts or anything that shows that you're using multiple resources in this, or even in a flat out procedure somewhere that says this is a multidisciplinary approach. Develop and management a plan, proper recovery cases, deviation to ensure that all customers' expectations are satisfied. What we're looking for in this statement is quite frankly that you require a project plan. Okay, this is absolutely essential. I don't know how you launch a new project without having a planning technique. Okay, whether this is some type of Gantt chart or some type of software. I don't want to name the most famous software. I don't want to put brands into this discussion, but there's probably a famous one that all of us recognize. Some type of Gantt chart tool, some type of Gantt chart process that actually says this is the tool, this is the technique, this is the way that we're actually going to manage the plan. So we want to see that this plan has successors, predecessors, responsibility. We'll see that later. Dates. All this stuff needs to be in the plan. Again, that's part of the objective evidence we're looking for on the next slide. So if you could, Jennifer. Transfer of data between deliverables. Okay. What we're looking for here is there's quite a few places in 9145 that require information to be transferred between the tools. This is simply one of them right here, where 9145 talks about information that needs to transfer between process flow diagrams, PFMEAs, and control plans. We need to have written in that procedure that there is to be consistency in information transfer. And this simple example that I put up here says, if a process flow diagram says that this is operation 10 of my manufacturing process, I have to have in my procedure that says the PFMEA has to say operation 10 as well. The control plan has to say operation 10 as well. These documents have to be connected. They have to be in sequence of each other. I can't have a process flow diagram that says this is operation 10, a PFMEA that says this is operation 200, and then a control plan that says this is operation 50. That breaks the whole series of how this system is required to work. Okay, developing relevant metrics for each project to monitor. Really, the next three are more in reporting structure and metric structure. So what we're really looking for here is that you develop the metrics, the milestones, what we expect to achieve out of this, and some in the procedure defining that this is how we're going to be tracking these metrics. This is what the metrics are required to be. This is how we're going to track it. This is how we report it. And again, the next one is monitoring and reporting. How we report this, how we escalate it. Most companies have some type of escalation procedure where if we have issues or risks, this is how we escalate it. That's perfect for this. Holding periodic project reviews. We're looking for in the procedure itself that we'll have, the project reviews, which are usually maybe weekly or bi-weekly where the team meets. Maybe there's higher project reviews at a higher level of the company that occur every month or 6 months. Something in the procedure that actually defines the fact that we are required to have project reviews. Again, all of these, we're not looking for evidence on an actual product. We're looking for evidence in the procedure itself to make sure that this is embedded in whatever program or project management procedure or in any other procedure that exists in the company that would support this. Okay, next slide, Jennifer. All right, shall statement. Section 4.3.3, phase 1. So now we're moving into the planning phase. Specifically here, we're going to talk the actual project management plan. Okay, now this is where we're actually intending on saying, okay, if I'm going into an audit, this is where I want to see a project now, not the procedure, but now I want to see a project. And the project plan itself is what we kind of talked about before. It's to assure that we actually have a project plan, whether the Gantt chart or whatever tool we want, that it actually is driving with the necessary deliverables, the necessary items, the necessary things that are predecessors, successor, tied, linked, the dates that we're actually running this project or new product launch with an actual plan. Again, it's not a fixed plan; it's constantly changing. But the fact that we're using this planning tool is essential here. Okay, next slide, Jennifer. So the objective evidence, again, a plan start and completion date seems inherently obvious. We need to have this aligned with the customer, the program, the project requirements. This project plan should make sure that if completed correctly, we're going to actually be successful in the program, at least from a timing standpoint. Key customer driven dates obviously have to be built into this to be successful, and a responsibility column. I don't think I've ever seen a Gantt chart or project plan that doesn't have a owner or responsible column on it. But nonetheless, this is what we want to make sure that we have. So when we're auditing this actual project. Yes, you know who's responsible for these activities. Agreed upon by the multidisciplinary team. Okay, this is where the project team says, here's my names on this project plan. This is the QE, this is the manufacturing engineer, this is the design engineer. We can see the multidisciplinary team actually on this plan. And then a validation schedule of interdependencies between the deliverables. So this is where we need to have all the way from our external suppliers all the way to our customer deliverables. This plan has to have successors, predecessors. We have to be able to see the links between the two. I can't have a plan that says deliver a part this week and make the part next week. We can't have that. That's a plan that's backwards. You can't make the part after you deliver it. So this plan has to have the proper interdependencies and connection to show that this is a legitimate plan. Okay, next slide, Jennifer. Okay, this shall statement. Section 4.4.2, phase 2. So this is our design engineering phase, what we call the product design and development. The product design deliverables shall include, but are not limited to, the ones you see below. So go to the next slide and we'll walk through. The intent of this shall is kind of a bold, it's a very bold statement, shall, in phase 2 itself. And I'm going to say this is the intent of all phase 2, but really the intent of this shall is to make sure that this product design is successful. This product design meets all the customer requirements, all the deliverables, the outputs, everything that we're supposed to meet is built into the design. This isn't the process, and this isn't the product. Okay, that's phase 3 and that's phase 4. This is the design. So at the end of this phase, what we want to have is a design release that, if produced to print or to the capabilities necessary based on the whatever characteristics on it, that we will be successful with our customer, be successful with our cost, quality, delivery. And let me rephrase that now, because I never want to get that order wrong. QDC, quality, delivery, cost. There we go. Let me reverse that. QDC. Okay, some of the objective evidence we're looking for here. The first one's about as simple as it can be. It's a print, some type of design documentation and BOM that defines a design, drawings, models, if it's software, firmware, whatever it is. I don't think I've ever gone into a site before that doesn't at least have an understanding that they need to have release prints. And that's actually even a 9100 requirement. Now, the thing that's a little bit different here that we got to watch for, which is really where we got to watch for in some of our own company's project management or program management plans, is this is phase 2. So what we got to be careful here is that if our project is sitting in phase 3, which is the process design, the process development, or in phase 4, which is the product validation, the expectation is we have a documented print now. We have some documented print that is now released that we are now incrementing and controlling. Okay, so this is where we need to be careful, because I've seen in places I've been to before throughout my career where we don't want to release the design until we get all the way up to production, because a lot of things are changing and we don't want to have to rev the design. We don't have to release the design. What we usually find out is we go into production, then they built a process, and the process that we built doesn't make the design that was released right now for the first time. And what we find was they actually made design changes in the background that were never tracked. They were never caught on releases. And now our process and our design are misaligned. APQP doesn't allow that. It says when you officially say that you're done with your design, which is the end of phase 2, at this point you have to enter into some type of design control. Okay. Design risk analysis, DRA, probably one of the most controversial topics in all of APQP and maybe in IAQG history. The idea that we wanted to run a design failure mode effect analysis. Really, DFMEA is what this is in the automotive industry. Our industry has a lot of other ways for doing design risk analysis as well. We hear FAMICA a lot. We hear some other techniques. getting DFMEA released on the standard wasn't possible. Even on the new version that we're working on right now, it won't say DFMEA. But what we're looking for here is we look for the site to actually have some type of design risk analysis, documented design risk analysis that says that if I actually complete this analysis or did this analysis or did the model or the build or whatever, that my design will be correct. So this is, again, it's not a DFMEA necessarily. It preferably is. But at this point, what we need to look for is that there is a design risk analysis. Listing of special requirements or special characteristics is what we're more commonly called now. The separation of product critical items and product key characteristics, very important. And actually, this is carrying through on the new version of IA 9100 as well. The separation of these two characteristics, one, the critical items, and two, the other side being the key characteristics. And what we're requiring in the 9145 is that they be listed somewhere, documented somewhere. These have to be on a design print and carried through on your design risk analysis, your PFMEA, your control plan. These have to be documented all the way through the process. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have any. There are some cases where you may not even have critical items or key characteristics, but if we do have one, we certainly need to list them and document them. And packaging specifications, this is really way up front. This is designed to, and the whole purpose of this is what automotive found for many years is they got all the way to the end of the project and nobody considered how we were going to ship this thing, package this thing. And what it was is kind of a finger pointing where the logistics people pointed at the manufacturing engineer pointed at the industrial engineer pointed at the logistic people. And none of them said, well, it's my responsibility for packaging. So right up front, we're looking at this. We're looking at this thing right up when they're doing the design. We need to start thinking about how we're going to package and ship this thing right up from the design phase. Okay, next slide, Jennifer. Okay, tolerance analysis. I'm not going to talk about this one too much, and the only reason I'm not going to talk about this right now is because this isn't actually coming out till the next version. Like Jennifer said, we got some things in here that we're putting in here because the new version of IA 9145, when it's released in the future, will have it. When that actually gets released, we'll discuss this a little bit more and how to check for it. But until then, I'm going to continue to move on. Preliminary supply chain management plan. Again, this started in phase one. It was absolutely necessary to put this item in phase one, and again now checked in phase two, because without having this supply chain management plan created, the idea of concurrent engineering or collaborative engineering is impossible. This concept that was created and started by APQP back in 1994, originally called simultaneous engineering on its primary release. In the late 90s, early 2000s, it changed to a concept called concurrent engineering when we realized it wasn't just things done together. It wasn't just things done at the same time. It was actually things done together or collaboratively. So it changed from simultaneous engineering, meaning at the same time, to concurrent engineering, meaning done at the same time together. So this is really important. Again, this is why this is a key one in this phase two. We got to make sure that the suppliers, we have this plan created because while we're designing it, we need supplier input. This is how we maintain that concurrent engineering throughout this process. And a feasibility assessment, we're going to talk about that on the next slide. Okay, Jennifer. Okay, phase three requirements, process. Now we're talking about the manufacturing process itself. Okay, phase two was the design itself, designing the design. And now in phase three, we're talking about designing the process. Okay, the process design deliverables shall include, but not limited to, all of these things right here. So let's go to the next slide, Jennifer. The intent of this is no different than it was in the design phase, except for now we're talking a manufacturing process. At this point, we're trying to design a manufacturing process that will meet the same intents. Okay, we're making an assumption here that if we meet the print, then we're going to meet all the customer characteristics. It's one of the burdens that's on the print. The print has to say, well, this is the specifications and the special characteristics that will make my customer happy, make my cost happy, make my delivery happy. This comes in and says, okay, the intent of this now is to say that if I make this process right, if I design this process right, I will make the print right, making all those work. And then this process will also do it in the most efficient way for quality, delivery, cost. Very similar to the design side, except for this is designing a process. Now, the objective evidence we're looking for, probably the most famous thing, process flow diagram. Don't think I've ever visited a site that didn't know what that was, or at least had one. And what we're simply looking for here, again, the guidance material, the SEMH material talks a lot deeper about what ideal versions of these are, what an ideal process flow diagram is, has templates and all that. But the SEMH material, again, is not auditable. It is merely where we would like to go. The standard is, I would say, the lowest common denominator to the SEMH material is the best we can get, the best in class. So what we're looking for in this one is, one, a controlled document. Okay, it has to show the process flow, has to actually be a process flow. And one thing that is a shall requirement in 9145 is it actually has to have operation numbers. So remember I said earlier that things have to be sequenced. So this has to be sequenced through the operation flow. So you need to see an op 10, op 20, op 30, or 1, 2, 3, or A, B, C, whatever. It has to be sequenced so that this sequence can be carried through the rest of the documents. Okay, PFMEA. Now we took a little bit of liberty here. It obviously has to be a controlled document. Obviously, it has to be sequenced correctly with the operation number. Those are shalls. But I've also included in here something that's a little bit more. I don't think it's too much to ask for. Hopefully, I don't know. We may get some blowback on this, but I don't see how you can be a PFMEA without at least having a severity occurrence detection in RPN. Maybe you only have those 4 columns. I don't know, but when we're auditing it, we should at least be able to see there is SOD and an RPN on there. I've never seen a PFMEA that didn't at least have those. At least, in fact, I've never seen a PF. Even the original PFMEAs that came out back in 1993 had those columns plus about 6 or 7 other columns. Now we have 12, 15 additional columns, but I've never seen any PFMEA that had less than just those 4. So we're also asking that when you look at a PFMEA to at least see that. Obviously, 9145 requires the operations be in sequence. 9100 requires it be a controlled document, but also we're looking for the what we call a SOD table or SOD and the RPN number. Okay, next slide. Process KCs. Okay, and again, this is if applicable. You won't always have process KCs, but if you do have process KCs, what we're looking for is that they're identified based on a product KC. A process KC is tied to a product KC. We do a process KC when the product KC and the drawing can't be directly manufactured. Okay, let's say a paint color. Somebody gives you a paint color that's right out of a book. Okay, well, that's definitely variation sensitive. I want to be centered on the paint color. As I deviate from the paint color, we get less and less happy. We get less and less enthusiastic, even though we're still in spec. So it certainly is a product KC, but there's no way I can statistically control a paint color that just has a number on a drawing. X26454 paint color. Okay, well, then when you have limits on that, okay. So in those cases, you have to have process KC, similar to like the gun that is going to be spraying at the velocity of the gun, the pressure behind the paint, to control the luminance and chrominance. Unfortunately, these are process characteristics that are identified that then have to be variation controlled, SPC controlled. This is how we variation control that product KC, because the product KC itself is not actually producible. We have to control the process. But again, we don't always see this. This is sometimes rare in certain products. It's less rare than others. But if we do have process KCs, we do need to see it tied to that product KC. And again, with all KCs and CIs, they have to be controlled in the control plan. And again, they have to be, as we said before, they have to be listed somewhere. All these KCs, which is ideally in the control plan. That's a great place to put process KCs. Okay, pre-launch control plan or control plans in general. This needs to, again, be a release document. It has to show KCs and CIs. That's a shall. KCs and CIs must be in a control plan. That is a shall. The other dimensions should be. We'd like to see all of the dimensions off the PFMEA into the control plan, then tying into the work instruction, but baby steps first. At this point, you have to do KCs and CIs. It has to be in the same sequence like we talked about. from the operation, from the process flow diagram, op 10, op 10, op 10, op 10, all the way through whatever the operation is. And it has to tie into those KCs and CIs being created in that operation. Production preparation plan. What we're looking for here is, what we used to call in automotive a manufacturing plan. So it's just simply some type of document that talks about resources, talks about the quantities to satisfy the customer demand rates, operator staffing, training. This can actually, if it ends up being, doesn't have to be on one document. You could find these on separate document resources, could actually be in the Gantt chart. But what we are looking for is these items, timing of the release work instructions certainly could be on the Gantt chart. Commissioning of the machines, the dates could be on the Gantt chart. But something that shows that we've actually considered this preparation plan. We actually have something, an idea tying these things to dates and resources and responsibilities. Again, you can find better versions and templates of these in the SEMH material, but again, I'll keep stressing it, the SEMH material is not auditable. Workstation documentation, simply put, to its lowest common denominator, work instructions. We need to see work instructions. Something, the work has to be documented that operators are to do. Has to be in a work instruction somewhere. And probably the most key thing for this, because that seems inherently obvious, the key thing for this is we're talking in phase 3. So when you're in phase 4, actually running your product runs, your product validation verification, you have to have work instructions. Okay, so we can't just wait till the end of the product and say, well, let's just wait to release the design till we go into production and wait to actually document these work instructions. No, we can't do that. We have to document these work instructions in phase 3 along with the development of the process. This allows us to rev control, allows us to change these work instructions and see the history of change through time as we're going through this development. An MSA plan. I love this. I love the fact that we talk about MSA. MSA in the new IA 9100 is working its way in. Measurement system analysis. Metrology leads technology. I got that burned into my head when I was 23 years old as an automotive designer. The ability to measure something leads the ability to create something. A gauge R&R if it's KC for variation sensitivity. CIs, you can do gauge R's or attribute agreement. We must do calibration on all of them. And in this phase 3, we have to see that documented plan of what we're planning on doing. And most of that is executed in phase 4. Okay, Jennifer. Packaging preservation labeling, again, saw that started out in phase 2. Here it is again in phase 3. Make sure we're constantly considering this, that updated document from phase 2 to make sure that it's been considered, it's been modified if necessary in this phase. Again, shouldn't be a problem with this one because it had to be created in phase 2 to start with, so we should just see the modifications. Now, supply chain management plan, again, this started out in phase 1. So again, as it's updating in phase 3, we're finishing the final design of our process. Therefore, so is our suppliers. So keeping in link and lockstep with those. And production readiness review, PRR results. So this, we don't have this very well defined in the procedure itself. There is, again, some better definition at SEMH, but we're looking for a document here that says that we considered this. We considered production readiness. Here's a document of how we plan on saying that this, if done correctly, this is what we expect to see. This is how we're going to validate the production readiness. The results of the readiness review say that we're ready to close out phase 3. This is really the end of phase 3 to say that this product is ready to go into its product validation phase. Okay, next slide. Shall statement. Okay, the last of our shall statement discussions, but probably one of the most impactful ones. So at this point, we're skipping into the end of phase 4 and really the phase 5. Really what is essentially the phase 5. And if you remember the beginning, what I was talking about was that the difference between automotive and APQP and PPAP and our APQP PPAP is we're 9145 encompasses them both. So we can't get through a 9145 audit without actually talking the change control process that is PPAP as well. Okay, so section 5.4, PPAP requirements, production part approval process. Now I'm going to read this shall, and I'm going to emphasize a couple words in here, and then I'm going to talk about the intent, And we're going to go through some of the objective evidence, and then I'm going to ask Jennifer to switch back to the slide because I'm going to read these intensified words again, hopefully to help walk us off the edge. So a PPAP resubmission is required when a previously approved product or process undergoes a change. Reference 9102 standard. Definition of change as referenced from 9102. We wanted to be very careful as we didn't want to create a new definition of change in 9145 and have it different than the other materials. So we tied into 9102, which is FAI, to make sure that that definition of change was the same as our definition of change. So we don't have to get confused between the two. Okay. For a correction or discrepancy in a previous submission, when a submission is required due to product or process change, the organization should supply applicable APQP activities and comply with internal and customer requirements regarding the PPAP submission. Okay. The intent of this shall is change control. So what we want to see here is we want to see that once you get through APQP, and we now have done all this work with all these tools, we put in all this effort to make sure this product is truly ready for serial production, meet its quality, delivery, cost goals, all of our customer satisfaction goals. We want to make sure that when it goes into production, 2 years from now, it's not meeting those goals anymore. We've changed ourselves right out of what we launched. You know, suppliers we put in place, you know, certain considerations that were taken aren't undone. They aren't undone later till we sit 2-3 years from now and go, why are we having such a problem with this product? When it launched, it was so successful. This is that change control process that says it's frozen when we launch it at the end of APQP. And now every single change after this needs to be controlled. And what we found all over our industry, and automotive learned this in the early 90s, I was there when it was happening live. We found that the majority of our escapes, the majority of our problems occur when that change window is open. So there's stability coming into the change. Everything's fine. We're not having quality, delivery, or cost problems. We have stability later downstream from the change. We don't have quality, delivery, cost problems. But when that change window is open, when the disruption is occurring, this is where the majority of our problems occur. The disruption. And this goes back to human factors. I'm not going to have a lot of conversation about that, but humans have a way of being able to continuously follow the same motion. Some human factors, let's call it flow. But when you break that flow, when you disrupt that flow, we go into a kind of a chaotic mode where all of a sudden we're not sure what to do next, and we forget to do it before, and we forget to do it after. Well, when this change window is open, it's a very dangerous phase. So this process was created 30 years ago to say, when you're going to do this change, we are going to essentially, I'll use the word bubble wrap everything around this change. All operators, all equipment, stop, control this area because we are in a moment of change right now. We're disrupting something. So everything has to be watched. Everything has to be checked. And that's what this PPAP process was really built around. And this is what we're trying to pull into our industry as well. Okay, so let's go to the next slide and talk through some of this objective evidence. And then I'm going to ask you, Jennifer, to switch to the slide back, because this slide, we're going to kind of go, oh, crap, this is a little rough. Okay, identify an item that changed as defined by AS 9102 Rev C. What you're looking at here, the 6 items you see are actually 9102 Rev C. And I'm going to focus straight on number 2 here. A change in manufacturing source, process, inspection method, tooling, material, alternate materials, or location of manufacture. So you read that one and you start saying, well, wait a minute. If I change my process, I have to re-PPAP. And that requires customer approval. If I change the order that I build something, build this first, then this second, when I used to do the second first and the first second. Yes, that's a change. When I used to use tooling A, but now I want to use tooling B. Yes, that's a change. This is that dangerous window when it opens up, when we create disruption and it causes collateral damage around the change. This is that window. This is that window of moment when we need to control everything around it. And what it's saying in the standard is that you actually have to do Appendix D, which is which is the PPAP approval template that's actually in the standard. It has 11 elements in it, straight out of 9140, straight out of APQP, 11 PPAP elements that are actually in it. There's actually 9 real tools in it that have to be completed. They are either dispositioned yes, no, or NA, whether or not this change is affecting those. And when you go in, when you're done with that, it needs customer approval. Okay, so when we looked at the impact of this for our industry, when we looked at the amount of changes that our industry is doing, we did some studies on it, and quite frankly, it was incredible. The thousands of changes that are occurring at every site every year was simply amazing. So the idea of what this would do, the impact on the industry of this was huge. So I want to walk us back off a little bit. So if you could go back to the previous slide, and I want to walk through a couple of these words again. In the definition of PPAP, it says right here, a PPAP resubmission is required with a previously approved product. So right off the bat, what we're talking about here is something that already went through the APQP process, already went through 9145. So immediately when you're standing in front of a plant, you don't look at the plant and say, holy smokes, everything in this plant is now is under PPAP control. That's not true. That's not true. It's for things that are now coming through AS 9145. And essentially, like I said before, it's because we want to control the goodness coming out of APQP. We want to maintain that when it goes into production. Okay. The second thing we're working on right now, and this may be a little bit of an announcement of this because it hasn't been released yet. We're very close to releasing this. We've been working on this bracing for impact, if you will, for over a year. We have a team that's been writing a new guidance material that's actually called the PPAP Delegation Authority. It is guidance material that will give customers a guidance around an ability to possibly delegate this to the supplier. In other words, I'm going to give my authority to you at the supplier, you at the supplier. And it ties into some of our future training we're talking about to become accredited in 9145, that maybe they would be the people that we would delegate it to. So we can move some of that approval inside the building for certain situations, things of low risk. So some of this approval doesn't necessarily have to go to the customer, if this guidance material is enacted. So with this, we're trying to minimize some of the impact in our industry. So we're trying to baby step our way into it. But we certainly see that this is the next big journey for our industry, is really controlling change, controlling the massive amount of change we have in industry, and making sure that while this change is occurring, it doesn't become something that is very disruptive. It doesn't become some type of event that later we got to figure our way out of. Okay, Jennifer, I'm going to hand this back to you to close us out.
Thank you, Mark. We now want to go into some additional resources that are available to our users. So first of all, Mark mentioned many times the Supply Chain Management Handbook. If you go to the section 7.2 of the Supply Chain Management Handbook, there is a plethora of information available to you regarding APQP. The information ranges from webinars such as this one, guidance material, meaning element cards for each of the different shalls and activities. There's a toolbox that has useful, helpful APQP PPAP checklists, templates, etc. Now, as Mark mentioned, this is just a guidance material. This is just a resource, so it is not auditable. It actually says on the front of the SCMH webpage that this is guidance. It's not auditable. So just please remember, this is just useful tools. The standards tell you the what is required. The guidance material tells you how to go implement it, how to do it. It's just helpful information. However, with that information, many of the things that we have today as standards actually started out as Supply Chain Management Handbook guidance. APQP, for example, used to be guidance before it was a standard. So some of the information, like PFMEAs, we have a strong feeling that it'll eventually become a standard itself. Additionally, when you're auditing, especially some of the smaller shops that you audit, we do recommend that you let the suppliers know about the Supply Chain Management Handbook. It is a free tool that they can use to help further their knowledge of APQP. If you're out doing an audit and you have a question regarding APQP or the guidance material, you have a couple options in which you can get questions answered. First of all, if your question is related to the standard, the APQP standard, you can always ask questions through OASIS. If you have a question that's related to the guidance material, we do have an option on the Supply Chain Management Handbook where you can email the APQP question and it comes to us to be answered. So either way, if you have a question, you're doing an audit and you need further clarification, these are two options that you can utilize to contact us and get that information. Lastly, APQP has been part of our industry for several years, but we're just now seeing that it's being implemented. And with that, there is a lot of confusion. There's a lack of knowledge about APQP. So as a pilot project with the IAQG, we are creating APQP training. Phase 1 will be a very high overview of APQP that will be available on the IAQG website. It will be free to users, and it's, like I said, very high level. We'll just give you some information about APQP. Phase 2, we are working with a third party to create APQP training through the IAQG that you can either procure to come to your company and give this training. You can require suppliers to take this training. But this information is coming from the IAQG. It will be IAQG sanctioned training that the 9145 team helps create. And then lastly, we want to encourage people to become more familiar with APQP, encourage more people to become subject matter experts in APQP. Therefore, we're creating a personal accreditation scheme in which once you've done some training, we're going to provide a test. It's not going to be an easy test, but if you pass that test, you'll get a certificate from the IAQG saying you're an APQP subject matter expert. To start, we're starting with this, just like I said, the 9145 APQP training. We do foresee that more of the core tool trainings will be available in the future. Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you both very much for your time and your knowledge shared with the audience today. As Jennifer shared with us earlier, and Mark as well, for more guidance about this and other topics, please visit the SCMH at https://scmh.iaqg.org. Thank you.